This story is called The Sword of Wood. And sorry to say, but this is the last story that I'll be telling this year. If you need stories over the summer, there's always Grimm's. There's so many resources for stories. But this one is a very old story that takes place in Afghanistan. Long ago, there was a king, and he was the ruler of all of Afghanistan. And in those days, they called the king the Shah. The Shah of Afghanistan lived in a magnificent palace in Kabul. Kabul was the capital of Afghanistan. Now, this king would sometimes get tired of being dressed up all the time and everybody looking to him for wisdom and proclamations. And sometimes he wanted to feel like what it was like to be an ordinary person. What did ordinary people really feel? If he got dressed as a king and went in the street, nobody would tell him the truth. They would all bow down and try to make him happy. So he got in the habit once or twice a week. When the evening came along, it might be a hot evening, he would change his clothes and change into the clothes of a peasant and sneak out of the back door of the palace and wander through the streets of Kabul, feasting his eyes on everything that he could never see in the palace and meeting all kinds of people. So it was just such a night, a warm and muggy night, that he decided once again to put on the clothes of a peasant, and off he went, and he wandered through the streets. And over time he came to the poor side of town, and that interested him the most. Why were people poor? How did they survive? Were they happy? Were they unhappy? Anyhow, he was wandering through this part of town where it's one hut leaned up against another and just single rooms and very shabby, and the roof's falling in. And as he was wandering through a lane, he heard a singing voice. And this voice was just lovely, and he wondered to himself, how could anybody who lives here be singing? How could they be happy? So he went up to that door and he knocked. Now, let me tell you something. In that part of the world, if you're a stranger or a foreigner or even a beggar and you come to someone's house and you ask for refreshment, it's their obligation to take care of you. They feel, in that part of the world, they feel very strongly that if somebody asks for help, you have to help them. Anyhow, he knocked on the door, and a young man came to the door, and the king looked at him and said, I'm a wanderer. I see you're eating dinner. Can I join you? And the young man said, come in, come in. I was just singing with my wife. And so the king stepped in. He sat down. The young man offered him, the poor man, to sit down with him. And there was the poor man with his wife, and they were sitting at a rickety table with two beat-up chairs, and they found something for the king to sit on. And there were a few salads and half a loaf of bread and some fruit and a little bit of wine. And they offered everything to the king. And the king said, I heard you singing. Why are you so happy? And the poor man said, how can I not be happy? I have everything I need. I have my lovely wife. I have a little bit to eat. And the day has been beautiful. I'm a very lucky man. Well, the king thought about it. And he says, what's your name? And the poor man says, my name's Jacob. What's yours? And the king answers, my name's Suleiman. And Jacob laughs and said, that's the name of the king. That's a good name to have. And the king laughed too. And the king said to him, so, Jacob, how do you get money to buy what little food you have? And Jacob said, I wander through the market during the day, offering to fix shoes. I fix people's shoes. It gives me enough money to buy food and what we need for dinner. My wife and I are happy. But, said the king, what would you do if you fell on hard times or you got sick? Who would take care of you? I don't see any children, and if you did have children, you'd have to wait for them to grow up to take care of you. And Jacob said, no, we don't have children. We haven't been blessed in that way, but my wife and I are very happy. But I don't worry about the future. It will take care of itself. I trust in heaven above and earth below. They've always taken care of me. Well, the king laughed and he said, all right, Jacob, good for you. Thank you for feeding me tonight. And Jacob said, you're welcome to visit any time. And the king took his leave. And as the king was walking back to the palace, he was thinking, is this guy a fool? he fixes shoes. But what if he couldn't fix shoes? What would he do? Is he just a foolish man who's not thinking of the future? I think I'm going to put a little tribulation in front of him, a little challenge, and see what happens. See if he keeps his good spirits. So the next day, the king issued a proclamation that nobody could be fixing shoes in the street. That day, the poor man, Jacob, got down to the street, heard the proclamation, scratched his head and said, "Oh, that's a change. I guess I won't be fixing shoes today. Heavens above, earth below. One door closes, so I can't fix shoes. But certainly another door will open. I just have to keep my eyes open to find that door." So he started walking through the street, and he saw a man carrying a big pitcher of water. And he spoke to the man, and the man said, "Oh yeah, we go to the well at the center of the town, and we dip our pitchers in, and we sell it because many people aren't strong enough to carry water. So we just go from place to place, and people ask for a pitcher of water, and we sell it to them." "Could I do that?" said Jacob. "Certainly," said the man. "There's always need for water." So Jacob went and purchased a big pitcher, and he went to the well and he drew water and he carried it around town, and people would shout from their gates, "Hey you, we'll buy that water." And so he sold water all day, and at the end of the day he had about the same amount of money as if he'd been fixing shoes. He went home. On his way home he bought a little bit of fruit, a little bit of salad, a little bit of bread for their dinner. He went home, he sat down with his wife, he started eating dinner, and he started singing. He was a happy man. That night again, the king changed into his peasant clothes, wandered into the streets of Kabul, but this time he knew right where he was going. He went straight to the poor man's, to Jacob's house. And he knocked on the door, and Jacob saw him and said, "Oh, come in, come and join us." And so he sat with Jacob and his wife, and he ate a little bit of what they had before him. And the king said to the poor man, "So, Jacob, I heard that the king had a proclamation today that you're not allowed to fix shoes in the street. That must have been terrible for you." And Jacob laughed and he said, "It wasn't too bad. You know, heavens above, earth below, I'm always taken care of. One door closes, another opens. So the door of fixing shoes opened, or closed. The door of carrying water opened. So I was a water carrier all day, and I did just as well as if I was fixing shoes. It might have been even easier. So I'm singing, because one should always sing when one's heart is happy." And the king joined him in the singing, and Jacob taught him a few songs, and they were, in fact, I might have some of those songs, right? Because it's just that time of year. Some of the songs they sang were, "Sweet the evening air of May, soft my cheek caressing, sweet the unseen lilac spray with its scented blessing, white and ghostly in the gloom, shine the apple trees in bloom, apple trees in bloom." And of course they were singing, because lilacs were blooming, they were singing, "Out in my father's garden the lilacs are in bloom, out in my father's garden the lilacs are in bloom, and all the birds of springtime have come to build their nests. Oh, how I love springtime, scent of lilacs in the air. Oh, how I love springtime, lilacs everywhere." Of course, he sang much more heartily than I'm singing, and the king joined in him because they all knew that song. And Jacob said, "Tomorrow, if you come by, I'll teach you about the rain song, because we need rain. It's getting dusty in the streets." "That's true," said the king, and he took his leave, and he said, "Thank you, Jacob. You're quite a nice man. Thank you for taking care of me." And Jacob said, "Think nothing of it. If I have food, it's always here to share. Come by and I'll teach you more songs." Well, the king left, and again he thought, well, that Jacob was kind of lucky. He found that he could carry water, but I wonder if that was taken away from him. What would he do next? Would he be grumpy and unhappy and complain like most people would? Or would he be resourceful in some way? I'm wondering how he would deal with it. So the next day, he made a proclamation that people have to get their own water. They can't hire people to bring water to them. So the next day, the poor man Jacob came to the central well in the center of Kabul, And all the water carriers were around kind of grumbling, and he said, "What's going on?" And they said, "The king outlawed carrying water for other people. I don't know what we're going to do." Well, Jacob looked up, he looked down, he said, "Heavens above, earth below. One door closes. That means another door opens. I just have to keep my eyes open and see what happens." And just then, there were a bunch of strong-looking men carrying axes and bow saws who were heading down the street. And he rushed over to them and he said, "What are you guys doing?" And they said, "We're woodcutters. We're going to the forest to cut wood so that people can burn it in their houses and cook with it." And the poor man Jacob asked, "Can I join you?" And they said, "Of course. There's more need for wood than we can cut." And so he joined the woodcutters. He went out in the woods. He worked hard all day. Wood cutting is very hard. But he got big bundles of wood that he brought back to the town square and was able to sell quite easily and made even more money than when he was a water carrier and a shoe repair guy. He went home whistling and singing, picking up some fruits and vegetables on the way home, a loaf of bread, a little bit of wine. He came home and he sat down with his wife and he was singing once again, quite happily. Well, the king made his way to Jacob's house that evening, knocked on the door. Jacob welcomed him in. The king said, "I heard you singing, so I don't know, what did you do? I heard the water carriers were banned today." "Ah," said Jacob, "yes, I was surprised, I must tell you, when I came to the well and discovered that water carrying was banned. We're in a place of the world where everybody needs water. But I know one door closes, another door opens." So I looked around, and there were some woodcutters. And I asked them if I could join them. They said yes. I went off, I cut wood all day. I'll tell you, it's hard. See all my blisters? He showed them all the blisters at the base of his fingers. But I made even more money than I do when I'm carrying water or fixing shoes. So I'm singing today. In fact, I promised you I would teach you the rain song. So I'm going to sing it right now, and you have to learn it. And he went, "Oh, the rain comes down, and it falls to the ground, and it flows down the river to the sea. The great and mighty ocean waves to the sky as the clouds pass, filled with oceans and oceans, oceans of rain. Drip, drop, drip, drop, drip-a-drop-a, drip-a-drop-a, drip, drop. Oh, the rain comes down, and it falls to the ground, and it flows down the river to the sea. The great and mighty ocean waves to the sky as the clouds pass, filled with oceans and oceans, oceans of rain. Drip, drop, drip, drop, drip-a-drop-a, drip-a-drop-a, drip, drop." Well, how could you not sing with a song like that? That's even a round. So they sang it together, and then they broke into round. The king learned it good enough that he could hold his own. And at the end of the evening, the king thanked the poor man again and went on his way. And when the king was walking back to the palace, he said, "You know, I just don't think he's been tested enough. I think I really have to put a test before him. How will he deal with this situation?" Well, the next day, the king called the captain of his palace guard, and he said, "Listen, when you see the woodcutters leaving from the central fountain about 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, you're to conscript them all to be palace guard. Give them a uniform, give them a sword. They're only paid once a month, so they won't get their pay till the end of the month. You understand?" The captain was a little surprised. He said, "Yes, Your Highness, and teach them a little bit how to guard too," said the king. "All right." So the next morning, as Jacob, our poor man, walked out to the well to join the other woodcutters, there was the captain of the guard with some of his men, and he said, "Pay attention, all woodcutters, by proclamation of the king. You are now conscripted into the palace guard. Come to the palace with me." Well, what can you do? They went. Jacob was bewildered, but he went to the palace, and right there they were given uniforms. They were given a magnificent sword belt with a sheath and a magnificent sword. And they were trained a little bit on how to be a guard, and he spent the day guarding. When he asked about pay, the captain said, "You'll be paid well, but only once a month at the end of the month." "But this is the beginning of the month," said Jacob. "It's not my problem," said the captain. "Be glad you have such a good job." Well, that night, when Jacob went home, first of all, his wife was surprised to see him "Honey, where'd you get that outfit?" And he said, "I'm now a guard at the palace." But she said, "Great, well, we'll have more money, right?" And he said, "Well, kind of, but they're not paying us to the end of the month." "What will we do?" said his wife. He said, "I'm going to think about it." So he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he thought some more. And at one point he pulled out the sword that the king had given him, and he looked at it. It was a magnificent sword with a magnificently sharp blade and all kinds of carvings on the handle. And he suddenly had an idea. He found some pieces of wood, and he got to work just like when he was a kid. He made a wooden sword just about the same length, and he painted the handle so it kind of looked like the sword the king had given him. Once he put it in the sheath, nobody could tell because there was the handle. It looked just like it. And he said to himself, "This is great." And the next morning, before guard duty, he went out and he sold the king's sword that he'd been given for a good sum of money, brought the money back, and then he went to work as a guard. A few days later, the king went to visit him, again as a peasant. He knocked on the door, and of course, before he even knocked, he could hear Jacob singing, "Oh, the rain comes down, and it falls to the ground, and it flows down the river to the sea." And the king said, "How can he be so happy? Where is he getting his money from?" He knocked on the door. Jacob came to the door. He said, "Oh, Suleiman, come in, come in. We have a little more food than usual." And the king sat down with him, and he said, "I see you singing. I see you have more food, but I heard that all the woodcutters were conscripted to be the king's guard. Is that what you are now?" And Jacob said, "Yes, I am the king's guard. Can you believe it? Me? I'm the king's guard. I have a uniform. I have a sword." "Ah, but the king said, I heard they don't pay you to the end of the month. What are you going to do for money?" And Jacob said, "That is a problem, but I thought and thought about it. And can you keep a secret?" And the king said, "Of course." "Well, I'm very good with wood, so I made a wooden sword identical size and shape. I adorned the handle and painted it so it looks from a distance just like the king's sword. I stuck that in my sheath, and I went and sold the king's sword in the market for a good sum of money. Easy that we can live on that for a month. So I'm singing. One door closes, another door opens. How lucky can I be? I'm a happy man. Come and sing with me." So they started singing together. The king was just puzzled by how does Jacob do this? How does he find happiness in these difficult moments? On the way home, on the way back to the palace that night, the king was thinking about it. And he thought, now I'm going to put Jacob on the spot and see how he deals with it. It's going to be a difficult situation. So the next day, the king's guard was called to witness an execution. This is back in those days when things like this happened. This doesn't happen anymore, I hope, nowhere on the planet. They had caught a thief who had been caught stealing melons from the king's garden. Not once or twice, but quite a few times. They had caught him, and finally he was going to be executed. So all the guard were standing in a circle, and in those days, I know it's horrific, but they call all the townspeople to watch too. So there's a big crowd, and the king is sitting way up on a dais, watching everything, and his captain of the guard is next to him. The king claps his hands. Everybody gets very quiet. And then the king whispers to the captain of the guard, "You see that one over there? One of your guardsmen, I think his name is Jacob, the one with the beard? Have him do the execution." "Yes, your highness," says the captain. And the captain goes over to Jacob and says to him, "Young man, come with me." And he comes with the captain, and they come to the big stage where the execution is going to happen, and the thief is laying there with his head on the block. And the captain of the guard pronounces, "This is what happens to he who steals from the king's garden. You," and he pointed to Jacob, "will take off his head." Now when Jacob heard that, he was horrified. He looked up, he looked down, he said, "Heavens above, earth below. Never in my life have I even killed a fly. I'm supposed to kill this man? Oh God, I can't do this." And he looked at the captain and he said, "Captain, choose somebody else. I can't do this." And the captain said, "This is on order of the king. You do it or you'll be executed yourself." Oh, Jacob turned a little white. He said, "Give me a moment to collect myself." So he stopped and he thought. And he thought. And he asked for help. "Heavens above, earth below, help me." And he came to a realization of what he could do. And he stood up. In front of the whole crowd, he stood up tall, squared his shoulders like he was a guardsman, and made this pronouncement. "Before everyone today, may you witness, I have never killed anyone in my whole life. I have never even killed a fly. I am called upon to cut this man's head off. Let it be that if this man is guilty, when I pull my sword out, I can cut off his head with one single blow. It will be like magic. His head just rolls off. But if this man is innocent, when I pull my sword out, may it turn to wood." Everybody started talking. But then the king said, "Silence! Go ahead." And Jacob pulled out his sword and held it up. And everyone saw that it was wood. And everyone went, "It's a miracle! It's a miracle! We've witnessed a miracle!" And the king said, the thief is innocent. Let him go. You, come up to me." He beckoned Jacob, and Jacob came up to him. And the king looked at him. "Jacob." And Jacob said, "How do you know my name?" "Jacob, do you recognize me?" And Jacob looked more carefully at the king, and he said, You're the man who visited me 4 times and sat at my table." And the king said, "Yes, I did. At first I thought you were foolish. Then I thought you were just lucky. But now I know you are wise. I'm glad to know you. Shake my hand." He actually shook hands with Jacob, and everybody was going, because shaking hands with the king is quite an honor. And then the king announces before the crowd, "If Jacob is willing, I would like him to be my #1 advisor. I need as much wisdom to rule as I can get." And Jacob looked at him and said, "Yes, your highness." "Then bow before me." And Jacob bowed before him, bowed his head. The king touched both of his shoulders with his hands and said, "You are now my advisor. You and your wife can come and live in the palace." And that's what happened. Jacob and his wife came and lived in the palace. And he was the #1 advisor for the king. And no matter what happened, whether it was wars or disagreements or financial strife or people cheating on their taxes, Jacob always had a very wise point of view, and he and the king became very close. And sometimes you even on a quiet evening, which there weren't many of in Kabul, you could sometimes hear them singing together up high in the palace. And this is the story of the Sword of Wood. Thank you for listening.